Good day, students. Today we are going to see a topic on income from house property. Out of that, today we are going to calculate the gross annual value of a house property. How to calculate the gross annual value? For this, we have four important items which we are going to compare and we are going to calculate the gross annual value. So for that, what are the four items are fair rent, municipal valuation or municipal rent, standard rent and actual rent received by the owner. So these four items are going to be considered for calculating gross annual value. First, we are going to compare the fair rent and municipal valuation. These two you have to compare and you have to find out whichever is higher. What is fair rent? This is nothing but a rent which is situated in the similar locality, the rent of the particular house. Municipal valuation is nothing but the local municipal corporation will be fixing the rent for that particular area. So these two we are going to compare and whichever is higher will be considered as expected rent. So we'll see in this problem which one will be considered as a expected rent. So first we are going to type like a fair rent. So there is no you have to type first municipal, next you have to type fair, no problem. Both you can write in any sequence. So municipal value. Okay. Fair rent is 10,000, 10 lakhs 80,000 and municipal valuation is 8 lakhs 64,000. So now we are going to consider whichever is higher. So if you see here, 10 lakhs 80,000 is the higher one. So this we are going to consider that as like expected rent. So what is expected rent? Expected rent is, that is whichever is higher of the above, whichever is higher, which is 10 lakhs 80,000 is the higher amount. Next, this expected rent will be compared with the standard rent. What is standard rent? This is nothing but which is fixed by the Rent Control Act. So standard rent, generally the expected rent should not go beyond standard rent. That means expected rent and standard rent will be compared and the least of the following will be considered as a like a actual rent, which will be compared with the actual rent. So what is standard rent? The standard rent is here 9 lakhs 60,000. So in this problem, which one will be considered as a standard rent? That is, which one will be considered as a lower? That is 9 lakhs 60,000 is the lower. So this one will be considered for the next step. So here, if you see expected rent is 10 lakh 80,000 and standard rent is 9 lakh 60,000, which should not exceed the standard rent, which is fixed by the Rent Control. So 9 lakh 60,000. Now we are going to compare this with actual rent. So one thing you have to remember, then whenever you are writing the actual rent, if there is any unrealized rent, what do you mean by unrealized rent? If the tenant is not paying the rent, he did not pay it, then it will be considered as unrealized rent. So that you have to minus. So unrealized rent is there, then which can be minus from the actual rent. But there is some conditions are there. That means that tenant should not be stayed in any other house of that same owner, and the owner should have been taken the enough legal measurement to collect the rent, and the tenant should be a assessee. Then only you can consider that rent as an unrealized rent. So that rent can be deducted from the actual rent and the remaining can be considered as a rent received by the owner. So in this problem, there is no unrealized rent is given. So I'm going to take the entire amount of actual rent as considered as received by the owner. So if now, what is this? Here you are going to consider whichever is higher. So whichever is higher, if you see 9 lakh 60,000 or 12 lakhs, whichever is higher, 12 lakhs will be considered as the gross annual value. So gross annual value is 12 lakhs. 12 lakhs. So this is the calculation of the gross annual value. Further, this can be continued with net annual value. That means by deducting the municipal tax paid by the owner will be considered as net annual value. After that, you can deduct two deductions which is allowed under the head income from house property. One is standard deduction, that is 30% of the NAV will be considered as the deduction. Next one is interest on housing loan taken for the purpose of purchase of the house or construction of the house or the repairs of the house will be considered as deduction. Only these two deduction can be deducted from the NAV. Then the last amount will be considered as taxable income from house property. So in this problem, they have asked you to calculate only gross annual yield. So we are going to stop this problem with this only.